Welcome back, everybody, to the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod. Is the Bitcoin bull market over? I think you can tell from my tone, we don't think so. Updates on potential Bitcoin strategic reserves, uh, big time shakeups in the White House press corps, lots to discuss. Well, why don't we dig in, Sam? Should we start with Bitcoin? I think it could be market inefficiencies. I think it could be sometimes there's just periods of time where people harvest profits. They may be sense a little uncertainty in the broader market. I mean, over the course of the life of Bitcoin has oftentimes been viewed as a risk asset that people invest in when they have some extra scratch laying around. And then when times get a little bit more turbulent, they tend to sell their Bitcoin. So there have been some statements in recent days from big time investors, including Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets, who is a multi-billionaire investor for many years. He was talking about how, there's some uncertainty right now. Trump is bringing in tariffs, negotiating new deals. The Republicans in Congress are working on the reconciliation bills where they may or may not pass, extension of tax cuts. Maybe that'll last for a few years. Maybe it'll be permanent. Who knows? There are just a lot of things being worked out right now that I think has introduced some volatility into the market. So it could be that. But if you had told us last year or the year before or any year prior to this that Bitcoin had, quote, crashed below 90,000,
Yeah.
I would have said, wow, that's great. So I think, people need to put things in perspective because the future is still very bright. There's still a supply cap on Bitcoin. It's still being adopted by people and institutions and governments all over the world. And so with limited supply and virtually unlimited demand, the future is still very bright. We're just in a moment of a little bit of uncertainty. Well, I think Pierre makes a good point. I mean, the market is maturing. I recall being at a very interesting roundtable discussion, this is years ago, with policy experts at a well-known think tank here in Washington and people from around the world and from around America. And volatility was one of the topics of conversation. And the kind of takeaway from that was that when there's more adoption, when the market is more mature, when there's been more reliable price discovery, then the volatility will, probably decrease. We'd see less extreme swings, and so I think that's just a different way uh, of looking at, you know, I guess a similar way to the way Pierre is looking at it, because now that there's, what is it, 19 million out of the 21 million that will ever exist are in circulation at this point. We now have some of the largest financial institutions in the world. We have the ETFs trading. There's been a lot more price discovery. And now with the halvings having, obviously less of an impact because we're at the fourth, I think there's something to that, that the extreme bull markets, the extreme swings back and forth will decrease over time as the market matures. So I recall hearing that conversation and being a part of it, years ago. And I think it's just coming true. What very smart people have been predicting for years is finally starting to happen. And that, by and large is a good thing, because I think the volatility has scared people away from the asset, in the past. But I think as more and more people adopt it, the price gets truly discovered, you see less extreme swings. I do think it might be as simple as that. No, I think you're right on. I think for people not yet familiar or not maybe steeped in the sector as much as we are, Bitcoin is different. It's not just the OG, although it is. It's unique in that it's truly decentralized and it's truly supply capped. And it is unlike pretty much anything else that relies a lot more on humans and human nature and a particular foundation or company. Bitcoin really is different. So that's why I think you see the separation in the market. between it and others. Historically, others have kind of ridden the coattails, but just because people look at it as a traditional asset class and that they should just hedge their bets. But, as we've said before, Bitcoin and crypto are not exactly synonyms. So I think you're seeing the difference there. And there's a reason why states across the country are pursuing strategic Bitcoin reserves, not strategic crypto reserves, but Bitcoin reserves, because it is the modern digital version of a precious metal. I don't know. That's the way I think about it. It's nice to see Citadel come around. We saw BlackRock come around and others, Fidelity, other name brand financial institutions have been coming around to it. It's nice to see another one, a true market maker. So very bullish signs, and the SBRs are bullish signs as well. It's a big deal because it's going to assemble leaders from Congress, CEOs from the industry, some true luminaries. I think probably nobody would make the case for a strategic Bitcoin reserve better than Michael Saylor, and he is going to give a keynote there that will be live streamed and available to the public. I think it's going to be a very worthwhile roundtable event. Meetings around DC for years, and where we are right now is that they're looking at a stablecoin bill, a broader market structure bill for digital assets, and then the strategic Bitcoin reserve is kind of on the back burner, which I think Senator Lummis and others would argue is probably not the right place for it on the priority list. It should be, this is a race. We are in a race to do this with between the federal government and the states and between our government and other countries. So politics kind of flows downhill from culture, and we've already seen it go from sort of a fringy retail asset now being adopted by the biggest financial institutions. And finally, the government is catching up. I think Senator Lummis is trying to light a fire here in DC to make people pay attention to this issue because it really is important. It could change the game in terms of our national debt and the devaluation of the dollar. It could just have such a profound positive long-term effect for the health of the country. She wants to highlight that, and she wants to make the case as strongly as possible, and that it should be Bitcoin only as a strategic asset because of its unique characteristics. So I'm looking forward to it. It will be very interesting because, like I said, it's leaders in politics and policymaking combined with some of the most brilliant, successful corporate leaders in this space getting together to figure out what's best for America after the disastrous Biden presidency, where they tried to put all of these companies out of business and foolishly tried to basically ban Bitcoin. It's a new day, and we can really seize leadership as a country in this space, and it's going to lead to a much brighter future. So Senator Lummis's leadership is excellent. It's needed. It is profound. And I think this event is going to be very educational for people. If you're not on the invited list, since it's somewhat limited capacity, definitely encourage you to watch the live stream, whichever portions of it are aired, especially Michael Saylor's keynote. That will be very enlightening, I think, for millions of people. Well, I think that it's a great question. And I want this number to be higher, but I'm going to put it at about a coin flip, about 50% that the federal government does it. As to whether a state government does it, like Texas, I think the chances are, almost 100% that some states are going to do this. At the federal level, the reason why I give it only 50-50 is a couple of reasons. One, there are still a lot of skeptics out there trapped in an old paradigm of the existing legacy power structures in Washington. They haven't gotten the memo, as they say. They don't know what time it is. They are not reading the rest of the country. They only exist in their bubble. They don't yet see the value in this. So there will be some resistance from whatever you want to call it, the deep state, legacy media, etc. The other reason why I don't have it at a higher percentage is because every presidency doesn't go exactly as planned. They end up getting sidetracked by global events, by natural disasters, by tragedies, or just by some other something that happens that shifts their focus. I mean, in the first Trump administration, the coronavirus completely upended everything. So I just think, and hopefully, I'm not hoping, obviously, I don't want anything bad to happen. It's just that, you know, things happen and focus changes. There could be a, volatility in the market that leads to some kind of shift in the public policy conversation. So I think that it is very possible, but you never know what the future holds in Washington just because there's always so much resistance to new ideas, and you never know what world event could end up shifting the focus of a presidency. So I don't know. That's my take, but what do you think?
As you all know, for decades, a group of DC based journalists, the White House Correspondents Association, has long dictated which journalists get to ask questions of the President of the United States in these most intimate spaces. Not anymore. I am proud to announce that we are going to give the power back to the people who read your papers, who watch your television shows, and who listen to your radio stations. Moving forward, the White House press pool will be determined by the White House press team. Legacy outlets who have participated in the press pool for decades will still be allowed to join, fear not, but we will also be offering the privilege to well-deserving outlets who have never been allowed to share in this awesome responsibility.
Well, it's a very good decision. Fully support it. I'm glad Caroline is doing that. The White House Correspondents Association has had an inflated sense of its own importance for quite some time. It's essentially like a union, or I guess if you want to give it more gravitas, or more like a student government, I guess, of the press room. It would do administrative things, assign seats, determine who gets to sit in the front row, determine who gets a seat since there's limited seats, determine who the pooler is. The pooler is, I think, the main focus of this announcement, and that's the one designee to chronicle the movements of the president and any words he utters in the course of a trip, for example. So if you go on Air Force One, the pooler would be, stating, all right, the president left the residence at, 11:04 a.m. and boarded Marine One, and then Marine One lands at Andrews Air Force Base at, 11:11 or whatever. And then the president boards Air Force One. And then if he stops under the wing to talk to them, or if he comes back to the press cabin to gaggle, the pooler is the official chronicler who just has like the date stamps, the exact words that he says whenever he's available, and things like that. So it's sort of it's been reserved for the legacy institutions by the association because they're deemed the most credible in the eyes of the association. Obviously, that has changed. It's not a right. Nobody's got a right to make those determinations, I don't think. And so, having the administration governing the White House say, no, we're going to have more say in this. We're going to give others opportunities to do things that are meaningful and historic and informative to the American public. People are consuming their information in different ways these days than they used to. So I think modernizing the way the press operation works is a very good idea. The association historically has wanted to it is a little cartelish, and they never wanted other sources to have access and to have a seat in the briefing room. There were other sort of newer media outlets that we would invite in, and the association would relegate them to standing in the back, like by the machinery and the cameras. And then they'd have to shout over the entire crowd just to ask a question because the association was kind of, I don't know, exclusive. They wanted to be exclusive. That's not the way a free press is supposed to work. So I do think this is a little bit of breaking up the cartel and widening the White House's reach. And of course, the people whose power is decreased by such a move are going to be upset, but that doesn't mean it's not the right move. I mean, I saw Caroline had tweeted at, I think it was Peter Baker, the New York Times, who was hysterical, talking about how Trump is basically Putin now, like a communist dictator, because they're going to rotate the pooler. Like, dude, get a grip. Get a grip. Like, this is okay. It's actually broadening the scope. It's enhancing the freedom of information for the American people and the world. So good move. The legacy media is in free fall. I mean, most of the political reporters or Politico reporters, who is, by the way, they can be a pooler. They're in the Correspondents Association. They do all the legacy media stuff. Most of their senior DC reporters have left just in the last year. The Washington Post just today announced that the editorial board is going to focus on liberty and free markets, which I've already seen meltdowns from their reporters saying this is interference in our, journalistic integrity or whatever. Okay, you've only had one side represented in your arguments, ever. Now that there might be a little bit of variety in the messaging coming out of the Post, they of course melt down. And this is it. When you institute something that is a promotion of freedom, the hysterics are hilarious because then it's all of a sudden you're trampling my freedom because you're giving somebody else freedom. Anyway, I don't know. I'm on a tangent here, but I just find this very interesting and it's a good move. And it's not dramatic. It's not drastic. This is a pretty measured approach. They could do way worse stuff. If the White House Correspondents Association really wants to fight, the White House could, I don't know, ban them from campus, put them at the old executive office building across the street. They still have offices in the West Wing of the White House. They still have the press room. They still have access to the president all the time. He does these hour-long gaggles in the Oval Office almost every day. He's going to do a cabinet meeting, I think, today, where I'm sure there will be a press avail as well. He's the most accessible president ever. But they tweak a little detail and say, we're going to rotate the pool designation a little more frequently, get a little broader audience. And they just completely rip all their hair out and go berserk. This is it's a good move by the White House, and the reaction to it is hilarious and very telling. And I think the American public should take solace in the fact that, this is fine. And if you're reacting really hostilely to this, maybe look in the mirror. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're the problem. That's about right. Well, there's a couple. They have rotating elections. So different people take board seats and leadership positions. I think it's each year. And so, if you are one of the outlets with a board seat or you're in a leadership position, I think you have a say over those things. But there's also just traditions, and that certain outlets have had certain seats for so long that if you decide to make a change, they're going to scream and yell and go and, crazy. So it's sort of a combination of just the elected leadership and traditions that they don't want to change, which is really on brand when you think about this. White House saying we're going to rotate the pooler and them going, no, it's just sort of intransigence and some authority vested in the elected leadership. Trump definitely accelerated it. He has been an accelerant, and in a very good way, in creating a culture of accountability for the media that did not exist. I do think it would have happened anyway at some point. Elon Musk buying Twitter, I think, was probably the most profound change I've seen in recent years. Think about it. When Joe Biden was president for those intervening 4 years, power of the legacy media weakened dramatically because in a democratic way, the small d democratic, the people looked for better sources of information. They knew they had been misled. I think that throughout the COVID pandemic was probably the thing that opened the most eyes the fastest. So there really was sort of a democratic uprising to disrupt the media environment. Trump has been the best combatant against the media I've seen in my entire life. So he definitely hastened it, but I think it was going to happen because people weren't going to put up with it anymore. Just the one-sidedness, the gaslighting, the open partisanship, the lack of focus on issues that matter to people, it was going to be disrupted one way or another. I think Trump was the accelerant that made it happen a little faster. Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and Rumble has a great model, and others, the ones you mentioned, obviously Elon's X and Megan Kelly and others. The model's great because it's more audience driven. It's giving people the information that they want, some maybe countercultural opinions that weren't previously available. And this is all because the platforms that delivered the information are no longer captured, or they're still captured, but the audience has more options. Think about it. For decades, people had the nightly news on CBS, NBC, ABC. That was pretty much it. It was that, and they all had obviously very similar partisan proclivities and perspectives. Fox News was introduced to basically cater to, that niche audience of half the country, became very successful. But just having that option wasn't really enough, especially with the speed of information these days. So I think the developments are great because they're audience driven and their disruption is good. Capturing the means of delivery of information, I think has been a weak point for the United States and the world really for decades. And I think we're entering a new era that is much more small d democratic, much more driven by the will of people. I think that's a good thing. And we're seeing the success, right? Like you said, Megyn Kelly's outperforming like all of CNN's digital assets by herself. And she has like 6 people working for her. Anyway, we don't need to beat a dead horse, but the disruption is good. That's about right. And I think if you look at that and you're like, oh gosh, am I a midwit? I think uh, what you should do is the first step to unburdening yourself from midwittery is to recognize that you might be a midwit, and then hopefully move in the direction of the Jedi rather than the caveman, because probably what the caveman and the midwit share is a lack of self-awareness. So yeah, move towards the consciousness of the Jedi. But that would be my recommendation. I think it's hilarious.
Cavemen and Jedi.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that is a great meme, yeah, for life. Where are you on the spectrum on any given issue, and try to improve yourself? Well, I had a lighter item for the grab bag. I am always excited to shamelessly shill my dog Larry. So in our house, we have a dog and a cat, but we're going to have a baby soon. So I wanted to show a picture of Larry, our good boy. Dylan, if you can throw him up there. There he is, just smiling, being happy. And then I came across a really cute video that somebody posted of their baby with their golden retriever. Dylan, can you just a video? There you go. The dog rocking the baby. So I hope I just spent a lot of time with like my in-laws getting a nursery ready and stuff. We're getting excited for the baby to arrive. This is what I hope for our future. Larry rocking the baby very soon. So I didn't have anything. That's all I wanted to highlight. Just cute dog pictures on the internet. I figured we talked about some heavy stuff. Let's end on that. That's right. All right. Maybe I got to get working on that. We're generally not in favor of meme coins here, but maybe a Larry coin could be an exception. That's cool. Well, this is a lot of fun. Anything else to add? Cool. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Remember to follow us on Twitter, X, at MorgansternNJ, at Sam Lyman 33. Like and subscribe. Send us your feedback, your comments. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll see you next time on the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod.